What's up, fellas? Today we're making a video talking about 3 simple tips to help you improve your pressing. They're not going to make a night and day difference by any means, but they're also really low scale things that don't take that much extra effort to do. So if we can make each day 0.5% better just by doing these habits, and then we accumulate up that 0.5% every day for a couple of years, maybe our presses are 5-10 pounds heavier than where they would otherwise be. So in other words, the accumulation of marginal gains. Basically, if we can find different ways to make different aspects of lifting just 1% better every now and then and apply that consistently across time, they'll have a compounding effect and we'll end up much better than we would otherwise be. That being said, we don't want to major in the minors, right? We don't want to focus on these little 1% gains without picking up the big ones like the sleep, the food, the training hard, right? Obviously, those things need to be in place, but then if we've got these little habits that don't take that much extra effort, we may as well do them and start accumulating those little bit better than we would be otherwise. So this video, the kind of basic premise is just how important maximizing localized blood flow is for bench pressing, right? So we know that maximizing localized blood flow is one of the core things that we are trying to accomplish when we're getting warm. Usually we are looking to maximize localized blood flow to like the relevant musculature. We're looking to raise our core body temperature. These things are associated with A, reduced injury risk, but B, a boosted performance, and more on that boosted performance in a moment. C, we're looking to address any small mobility deficits that we can fix in that time that are going to be able to make us more mechanically efficient. And D, we're looking to kind of correct any minor technical faults on the way up. That way we can like make forward technical progression, not just strength progression. So if we look at pressing, potentially we could say that that localized blood flow is maybe a little bit more important, as pressing tends to be a little bit less technical. So it's a little bit more just kind of based on your muscle contractile property. So maximizing that local blood flow is a bigger percentage of the equation. There tends to be less mobility demands. So if we think about it, we're like, okay, by maximizing localized blood flow, we're probably going to raise our core body temperature as a byproduct. So when getting ready for pressing, a lot of it is just flushing blood to the musculature surrounding the shoulder joints. So what does that mean? Pecs, shoulders, lats, maybe a little bit of blood to the arms. You're going to notice that, your ability to output force once you have a bit of a pump in the surrounding musculature is going to be noticeably better. My boy Bald Omni-Man mentioned that in a video recently, and I wanted to kind of make this video based on that because I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. And as soon as I started prioritizing maximizing localized blood flow before I start doing my bench and practicing my technique and working my way up in weight, as soon as I started really prioritizing the blood flow aspect, the frequency at which I would strain a rotator cuff or tweak a pec and have to take one down week went down drastically, which leads to, call it maybe 4 extra weeks of hard training a year. Again, these things are going to accumulate with time and tend to be quite helpful. So kind of all based around the premise that maximizing localized blood flow is going to be a big portion of preparing to do any heavy pressing. So getting into that brings me to my first tip. And this is just nothing magical about this, right? This is just something that I tried out one day, had a little bit of good success with it, did consistently for a while, noticed my results were better when I was doing it. And I've stuck with it ever since. So if we want to maximize localized blood flow, the other thing we want to do is we don't want to significantly fatigue ourselves. So we're like, okay, how can we drive some blood to the local musculature without doing so much or so heavy that it's going to detract from the quality of our main work? Because that's when you're doing too much, right? If you're doing so much warming up that your performance is lessened on the stuff that actually matters, the sets that are driving the adaptation, you've done too much. So how do we strike a good middle ground? We're probably going to stick to pretty light weights for higher reps rather than trying to drive a pump with moderate weights for moderate reps or so on and so forth. So if we're going to be doing a bunch of reps at really light weights just to get some blood flow before we start taking serious sets on the way up, one little trick that I've found, whether it be for overhead press, incline press, flat press, is to do some of those high volume sets with dumbbells. Basically, the 2 reasons I found this helpful is 1, if you turn the dumbbells slightly, you can get a greater range of motion from dumbbells than you can the barbell. So we're warming up our musculature through a greater range of motion. And 2, dumbbells are 1 deviation less stabilized than a barbell. So we're also going to be warming up the stabilizing musculature a little bit better than what we would be otherwise. This can look something like doing 2 sets of 25 with some light dumbbells and then hopping on the bench. If you're someone who's kind of pressed for time, let's say you take the bar for 30, you take 95 for 20, and then you take 135 for 10. That's your standard warm-up. One thing you can do is you swap that empty bar set for a pair of 25s for 30, and then you swap that 95-pound set for a pair of 50s for 20. So you just use the equivalent weight in dumbbells and substitute those for the warm-up sets. The specificity is so inherently low to an empty bar bench press that I don't think you're missing out on much as far as technical practice on the way up. And if that lets us drive better blood flow by maximizing the range of motion and challenging our stabilizers, it's just a good way to get moving a little bit better in my experience. Nothing magic about it, but I do implore you guys to try that if you have an overhead session. Switch your bar and 95-pound set to some light dumbbells. If you're a little bit... if you're not super strong on the overhead, maybe take 25s and then 35s and then start working on a bar at 95. If you're on the bench press, maybe the 25s, then the 50s, and then start working at a plate. Or you don't have to drop the 45, the 95, the 135. You can just do the dumbbells prior. Other things that help with this is also kind of just supersetting that dumbbell work or that light barbell bench pressing. By doing those work, we're going to drive musculature, or drive blood flow to the musculature that's actually doing the pressing. Supersetting that with the other major muscle group that acts on the shoulder joint, which is our lats, so some kind of pull down, is another way to just drive a lot of blood flow surrounding the joint and be ready to start doing the actual training. So that is tip number one. Tip number two is a really simple one, and it's just training in a hoodie. And if training in a hoodie is unbearable for you, warming up in a hoodie. Basically, it just makes the two goals that we're trying to achieve much quicker, right? There's no downsides to it so long as you're drinking your water and you're getting your electrolytes to account for a little bit of extra sweat. By putting on a hoodie, the amount of work you have to do to raise your core body temperature goes down significantly, especially during the winter. Blood is more likely to be flushed to the muscles because when you feel remotely cold, blood shunts away from your limbs to be stored around your organs. So any inclination or any feeling of coldness is going to make it significantly harder to get a pump, drive that musculature, or drive that blood to the musculature. So by putting ourselves in a really warm environment, your body does the exact opposite, actually. It flushes the blood out to the limbs to try to cool your body, making it much easier to get a pump. If you don't like either of these things, one other option that you have is muscle warming balms. So I actually have one right here. I like this one. It's J.R. Watkins warming balm from Amazon. It's pretty damn warm, but if you have a muscle group that's a little bit achy and you just want to help yourself in with getting like physically warm, just throwing some warming balm on the area, it can be helpful. It's nothing magic. It's not doing anything super physiologically important, but it can be another helpful trick in speeding up that warming up process, which gets me to the last one. All of these things kind of center around that big topic of driving as much blood to the surrounding musculature as we can without fatiguing ourselves. And the last one is something that I've already talked about a billion times and I will continue talking about a billion times. And that's just keeping a close eye on your hydration status. Your blood volume is greater when you're well hydrated and it's less when you're dehydrated, right? If you want to drop your blood pressure, one of the easiest ways to do so is just stop drinking water for a while. Your blood pressure will drop because blood volume will drop. There's a reason that's not a good strategy for managing our blood pressure because there's other negative impacts that negatively impacts our performance, right? But if we want to get a good quality pump before we start training, we want to make that easy for ourselves. So intaking adequate water before training, especially if you're someone who trains in the morning, because we wake up in a dehydrated state, we're emitting water via our breath and sweating at a very slow rate while we sleep, or maybe a fast rate while we sleep, depending on the person. And we're also not intaking water or electrolytes or glucose at the same rate we normally do. So everybody wakes up in some degree of a dehydrated state. And if you're someone who trains early, we have to work hard to undo that. I think you'll notice if you try to train early in the morning and you're someone who doesn't usually, you're gonna have a very hard time getting a pump. So basically we wanna hit our sodium, we wanna hit our carbs, we wanna hit a quality amount of fluid intake, right? If we kind of check those boxes, okay, cool, we're making it easier for ourselves to get a pump. Maybe you can use pump product just to make it easier. It could be something as simple as beetroot powder or just bulk supplements, L-citrulline. Just throw, if you throw, I don't want to give you guys the wrong amount, but about a teaspoon of L-citrulline, which is dirt cheap on Amazon if you just buy the raw ingredient. If you throw about a teaspoon of that into a bottle of Gatorade and you drink that before you train, I'm sure you'll notice to some degree that you can drive a lot more blood to your muscles. There's probably other benefits to driving a lot of blood to the muscles. given that metabolite buildup seems to be an independent driver of hypertrophy. So we have our mechanical tension, our heavy stuff, that's really going to be the most important part of putting on muscle, but also the accumulation of metabolites within the muscle, kind of driving a pump, can also be another factor in maximizing our hypertrophy. So getting a good pump is maybe a secondary training goal. But it's also a very important part of warming up. So any of these steps we can take to get warm a little bit easier probably are going to be worthwhile, and they're going to improve our performance on our worst days. Maybe it won't help your performance on your best days, but we want to raise the quality of that worst day. The best day will come as that comes up. So that's all. That's my 3 tips. I hope you guys liked the video. Jumbled over my tongue. Wow. Jumbled over my tongue a whole lot of times, just like that. But I think that the information was there, so I'm not going to reshoot it. Thank you for watching my video. I appreciate all of you guys.